Hi there, this is Jonny Miller from Point Blank Online Music School. I'm back once more to show you some cool little tricks with Ableton Live 8 and sounds and samples from clickproduce.com. Tonight I'm putting together a little house track, and I've used some sounds and loops and samples from a really cool pack from Loop Masters called Berkson and Watt. Dan Berkson and James Watt, two producers who have put together this really lovely pack for house. It can be used for tech house. And just, you know, your regular straight up soulful house. Lots of really nice sounds in here. You've got a nice folder of Rex loops, which is all the loops in the whole pack, in the whole library, in Rex format for if you're using Reason, and also Ableton Live. But we've got also obviously WAV loops for all the DAWs, containing drum elements, full beats, musical loops. These are really useful to kind of cut up and use as inspiration for your tracks, and also synth loops. Really nice stuff in here too. Now I've taken a few of these sounds and put together this little sketch here, and I wanted to just show you firstly what I've got, and then I'm going to move on to looking at Sampler and how the Shaper device on Sampler can add a little bit of extra warmth and movement to bass sounds when you're producing house music like this. The first element in the set is just one of the Berkson and Watt drum beats. It's one of the full drum beats. I like this just because it's got that really nice kind of percussive edge, lots of little bells and bottle noises and lots of interesting little bits behind the kick and the hats. Now I've actually layered that with a couple of extra little percussive textures. Got this one here, and this is just one of the little sound effect loops. Now I've used clip envelopes to take out part of that loop, so I've just really hearing this little hit here is giving us a nice little bit of added flavor. So if I put the beat back in, it just adds a nice little texture. And then lastly, in terms of the drums, I've got this element which is the water drop sample, and this again is just one of the sound effect loops. And what I've done here is I've gone in and I've added warp markers to essentially quantize these little hits so that they play on, for instance, the 16ths here. So kind of cleaning that up and making it snap nicely to the drums. So these little water droplet sounds just added to the beat just gives a really nice little flavor. So that's my three drum elements. I then use one of the pad, one of the melody loops from the Berkson and Watt loop pack to add a little bit of musical flavor in here. Just a really nice pad. And as I do quite a lot when I'm working with samples, just to make a variation of that, just at a different pitch. I've also used some warping tricks on the preserve. I did a video about that a few weeks back to create a kind of gating effect on that pad to make it stuttered and rhythmic. So lastly, to Sampler, where we're going to look at the Shaper device, and just to show you what I've got in here, I've just used one of the Mini Moog samples, the Mini Moog bass samples that we get in the Berkson Watt pack, and really lovely warm sound. And I've programmed up a little bass melody here over 4 bars. And I think at this just, you know, I programmed this in just to find something to suit the pad. So that works over 4 bars as well. I tried to and keep that long over 4 bars instead of always going for a sort of short, like kind of looping bass effect. Sometimes it's nice to have a bass melody in your track. It gives it a little bit more kind of melodic depth rather than just a looping kind of repetitive feel. Anyway, going back to Sampler, if I go to the filter page, what we've got here is this built-in shaper down the bottom left, and you've actually got one of these in Operator too. If you've got Live 8 Suite, in the filter section of Operator, and it's just a little built-in wave shaper that we can use to add a bit of warmth to the sound. We've got 4 wave shaper types: soft, hard, sine and 4-bit, and they kind of do what they say on the tin really. Sine wave is a nice kind of rounded shaped wave shaper effect. Just adds that extra little bit of noise and and kind of clean saturation onto the sounds. And I always describe this as making the sound kind of move out towards you in the mix. If I put the full track on and then add the shaper, I can use that shaper amount just to poke the bass out of the mix a little bit, give it a little bit more width and colour throughout the track. Now I've also got quite some nice interesting wave shaper types here. If I switch to 4-bit for instance and just solo the bass, this adds a sense of digital saturation. So if you're making stuff like dubstep, you know, if your bass sound is coming from sampler, try adding that particular wave shaper type to your bass. But for this particular track, I'm going to keep it in the sine wave shaper type, because that's again nice and rounded. It gives a nice shaped saturation feel. Now I'm going to go into the clip. I'm going to keep that amount up. I'm going to go into the clip and go into clip envelopes. And now just because that's the last parameter that I've been working with on sampler, the shaper amount, that's now open for me, ready in clip envelopes. And this is how live works. Whatever it is that you've last done, whatever parameter or pot or button you've last pushed or turned on any device, go to clip envelopes and it should be open for you, ready to work. So here in the device chooser, it's selected already for me to work the Minimoog bass sampler device, and in the controller chooser it's already selected the shaper amount for me. So I can now add that shaper amount just by moving this percentage value up and down, and it works at 0 to 100%, and that percentage is the percentage between 0 and in this case 69 on that amount value. I could take that up to 100, and now my value is literally 100 to 0. So if I bring this down to 0, we get no saturation. If I bring it up, so I can now draw that in. If I just draw in some breakpoints and kind of bring in some wave shaper just to kind of make this move really. So as some of the notes play, I'm going to bring the wave shaper up and drop it down kind of towards the end. There we go. Let's try that. So it's quite subtle, but it's giving that bass subtle movement over time instead of just being a static note. Now we could use velocity as well to change the volume of each note, but you know, instead of doing that, keep your velocities the same and draw in saturation amount. It just gives the bass like a kind of pulsing life. It's quite hard to replicate really. Just feels a bit more natural. So what we can do now is just hit the unlink button, and this is something else that I did a video on a few months back now. If I change the length of this region to, let's say, 8 bars, I could draw in 8 bars worth of shaper information. So even though the loop is only 4 bars, I could extend that to however long I want it to be, maybe 16 bars. So get different values over 16 bars as that loop plays. So there's lots of possibilities here for creating, again, a sense of life for this bass part. I don't want it to be static. I don't want it to just play the note at the same volume each time. I want to give it life, and that's a really good way to do that using the shaper function on sampler. Try out some different shaper types as well for the different sounds that you might have in the sampler, but definitely for this track I think the sine shaper type and then just different values, bringing that up and down over time, is going to work for this track. Anyway, you can learn loads more cool stuff at pointblankonline.net, and I'll be back again next week to show you some more cool little tricks with sounds and samples from clickproduce.com and the ever faithful Ableton Live 8. Peace.